I'm just not ready to do that at this point. I'm not there right now. And I hope to, though, and I want to. But I think what is required is that we unify this party.
House Speaker Paul Ryan delivering a highly unusual rebuke of his party's presumed nominee. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume, Julie Pace, who covers the White House and the campaign for the Associated Press, Kimberley Strassel from the Wall Street Journal, and Charles Lane of the Washington Post. Well, Brit, how serious is this split between Trump and Ryan? I have to say, I found it interesting today that Paul Manafort was making it clear who's the head of the party, and it isn't Paul Ryan in his mind. And what do you expect from their big meeting on Thursday?
Well, you know, I think that this is an excellent example of how divided this party is and is likely to remain. After all, remember what Trump said. He said, I don't support Paul Ryan's agenda. Paul Ryan's agenda is essentially the current conservative agenda. It is reform conservatism. He's a true blue conservative. Donald Trump ran as something else. And he ran to gather the support of people who were alienated and deeply disappointed in the Republican leadership in Washington. So now comes the moment. Does he need to pull these people who were part of the party establishment, if you will, behind him? He, I think, believes he doesn't have to. That if they want to get on board with him, great. But he's not going to, he doesn't seem to be willing to adjust his way of looking at things, his agenda, his issue positions, his sense of, you know, what the Constitution requires to accommodate them and to bring them on board.
And do you think that he can run as a free agent, basically aside and apart from the Republican Party establishment?
I think he thinks he can.
But do you think he can?
Well, I think that if you look at his numbers, he needs every vote he can get. I mean, after all, Mitt Romney got, what, 93% of the Republican vote. With Trump so deeply underwater with women, hopelessly underwater with Hispanics, African Americans, and others, I think, you know, he's got to figure out how to make it all add up to give him some kind of a majority. And if he begins basically by turning off a lot of, you know, mainstream Republicans, I don't see how he gets there. Now, maybe, you know, maybe he can find in this country so many alienated blue-collar Democrats that will come to his cause that he can win, but I doubt it.
Meanwhile, President Obama piled on this week, making his first comments about Trump since he became the presumptive Republican nominee, and he challenged Republican voters. Here he is.
We are in serious times, and this is a really serious job. This is not entertainment. This is not a reality show. This is a contest for the presidency of the United States.
Julie, how big a role does President Obama plan to play in this campaign? And he seems to take particular delight, and he has actually for a few years now, in going after, well, because I guess since the birther issue, right, in going after Donald Trump.
I think if the president has his way, he will play a very large role in this campaign. And right now, the Clinton campaign would like to see him play a large role. They think that he is still an effective messenger for Democrats, for young voters, for African Americans who Clinton would need in a general election. But I think what's interesting with both Obama and Clinton in the last week or so is you hear them making these very specific appeals to Republican voters. Clinton talked about thoughtful Republicans, and they think that with Trump at the top of the Republican ticket, that they could appeal to people who may not believe in policy positions that Clinton has, but at least would feel comfortable that she wouldn't necessarily drive the country into a ditch and may be able to come around and vote for her for at least one term.
Do you think it's personal with Obama?
I do. I really do. I mean, you have to remember when Trump was leading the birther movement in Obama's first term, what a shot at the president's credibility that was. And I think that he is surprised and his staff is surprised that Trump has gone from being sort of this showman on the side of the political arena to actually now the presumptive nominee. And if he were to be succeeded by Donald Trump as president, what would that say about Obama and his stewardship of the country as well?
We asked you for questions for the panel, and we got a bunch like these from Craig Coldren on Facebook, who writes, no wonder the GOP is dying. Party members would rather let a Democrat win than vote for a non-perfect candidate. No wonder we, the people, are uprising. Kim, how do you answer Craig? And, you know, this is an interesting question because we're talking about all the negatives, but the fact is that Trump ran as the anti-establishment candidate. Now he's getting hammered by the Bushes and by Romney and Lindsey Graham. They say they can't support Trump. In a sense, doesn't that just certify him as the outsider?
Look, when we talk about a non-perfect candidate, I keep hearing everyone talk about Trump's agenda. Paul Manafort was on saying his agenda, and he articulated it so well. What part of that agenda are we talking about? When he put out his tax plan, or when he disavowed it this week and said he wasn't a big fan of his own tax plan? When he said we cannot raise the minimum wage, and then he turned around this week and said, well, yeah, we probably can do that after all. I mean, this is why Paul Ryan can't support Donald Trump at the moment, because Paul Ryan is a conviction politician who believes in certain ideals. So those voters out there who have an understanding of the Republican Party as something that has certain principles are not going to be able to rally behind this person. And yes, some of them, Obama is onto something. There will be a number of them who look and say, I would rather have somebody who I felt had a consistent viewpoint, maybe not one I agree with, than one who I don't know what he's going to say from one day to the next.
Well, so having said that, do you really think that they're going to go to this meeting, the nominee of the party, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and the Speaker of the House, they're going to sit down together and come out and basically say, no, no deal?
No, I think that they will come out. I don't think that there will be a deal. But look, what Paul Ryan essentially did here is he sort of said this is a little bit of a test. You've got to go out and prove that you can get the people who are the foundation of our party, because nothing's set in stone, really. I mean, in the reality is that we keep talking about him as a presumptive nominee in a race where everything has been up for grabs, anything could happen. There are a lot of delegates out there who still do not support Donald Trump. Who knows what could happen?
I want to pivot this conversation a bit with you, Chuck. I want to take a look. It was a fascinating story today, actually, this week rather, in the Wall Street Journal, at the electoral map, which shows just the enormous advantage that Democrats begin with. All the states that you see there in blue, particularly on the East Coast and the West Coast, have voted Democratic for the last 6 elections in a row. They represent 242 electoral votes, just 28 shy of a majority. All the states in red have voted Republican for those same 6 straight elections. That's 102 electoral votes, or 168 shy of a majority. Chuck, the only way that Trump can possibly win is to flip some of those blue states that have voted 6 times in a row, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin.
There's sort of 2 theories about that. Trump's theory is, look, I'm talking about immigration, I'm talking about trade. Those are issues that resonate in the Rust Belt, which are the areas you just described. And so I can bring people who used to vote Democratic over to the Republican side. That's the Trump theory of the case. The case that I think is a little bit more correct is that that might work if he didn't have all the other negatives going against him, because he is going to push, or at least right now, he is pushing women away. He is pushing, even in those heavily white states, there are a number of Hispanics, those are all pushed away. In other words, the question that I think that all revolves around is, does he bring in more than he pushes away? And right now it looks to me like he's pushing away more than he's bringing in. And those relative handful of red states that you showed there is really all he can count on.
Let me argue a different theory of the case, Brit, in the time we have left, which would be there is a huge disgust with Washington and the establishment. We see it not only on the Republican side, we also see it on the Democratic side with Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton represents that. She's been around for, what, a quarter of a century, and that there may be just a sense of, you know, we'll try it, and if he's no good, we'll fire him in 4 years.
Well, certainly Trump's great advantage is that the Democratic nominee is weak, discredited, old in the sense of people having known her for a long time. He has terrible negatives. Hers are not as bad as his, but they're pretty bad. So her weakness is a tremendous asset to him and gives him at least a chance to appeal to voters who might be peeled away to go to him. But remember this about him, Chris. This is, above all, this Trump mania, is a cult of personality. And the people who support him, basically what they believe in is whatever he says. And if he changes his mind, they'll believe that too. I just don't know how many people are willing to get on that train. People with convictions, people who are conservative and all that. And, when your negatives are as bad as his, with as many groups as are bad as he has, the bad negatives, the first thing you shouldn't do is alienate the conservatives in the Republican Party. It is, after all, still to this day a conservative party.
All right, we have to take a break here, but we'll see you all a little later.